So recently I was having a conversation in here with one of my students and dear friends who I've known for about 4 or 5 years. And I was joking on him. I said, man, since I've known you, you went from the Army and you've had about 5, 6, 10 jobs since then. And he's like, no, I ain't had that many jobs, Si. It's only been like 4 or 5. And I'm like, it seems like 10. And then one of my students overheard the conversation. He said, well, why do military people struggle to make a transition from military life to civilian life? And what's the challenge? And I said, man, that is a great question. It's not a normal jiu-jitsu question, but it's something I've talked about in previous videos, the challenges I've had. And I was like, I talk about mental health a lot in the We Defy Foundation. And I was like, man, that'd be a good question of the week. And let me try to thoughtfully and honestly answer that question. And hopefully some of the military members out there can chime in below on their experiences. And that it can be a beneficial thing to try to understand what our challenges are when we go from the United States military to a civilian job. So I'm al-Aziz, the owner and head instructor of Semper Fortis Jiu-Jitsu here in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm gonna do my best to try to tackle this good question. So one of the challenges is the mission is different. You're going from the US military, who despite all the different ideas people have, at the end of the day, the military's job is to put warheads on foreheads. That's what the military does. There's no way to sugarcoat it. I mean, people try to sugarcoat it, but that's what we do. And then you're transitioning, whether it's after 4 years or even more difficult after 20 years, or in my case, I did 33 years in the Navy and transitioned. And it's like now your mission is maybe selling more cars for Ford than General Motors and Toyota and Honda sell, or maybe you're trying to sell more electronics for Best Buy, or you're trying to sell more real estate, or you're trying to make more profits for the bank that you're working for than the other banks, or you're trying to get more construction projects. So the mission is different, and it's not as intense and maybe not as rewarding. Some people can make that transition easily. I knew that was not going to be an easy transition for me, because a lot of times people were like, Saad, you've got a master's degree from Baylor University, you was a naval officer, why didn't you take some corporate job? And I was like, man, my personality wasn't going to make that transition, because it's just a different mission set. And so I had to find a job that was going to fit my personality and what I wanted to do and what was going to be fulfilling for me. And selling more cars or making more money for the bank or real estate or new electronic inventions or computer software work, it just wasn't going to be as rewarding as my experience with the US military, because I loved being in the military. So it was like, I had to find what was going to be rewarding for me. Being a small business owner, teaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu every day, going to work with my wife and kids every day, getting maximum family time. For me, that was like my new calling, and that excites me about coming to work. Whereas other jobs would not have excited me as much. So my friend that's been going through a number of job changes, it's almost like that old country song where he's like, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. I know I should give up teaching jiu-jitsu and go on the road and sing, but I'm gonna stick with jiu-jitsu. So, it's like your tolerance, for that mission is just not the same, because it's not as intense, it's not as exciting or as rewarding. And so you have to make that transition. The other thing is the culture is different. Like the camaraderie in the military is very intense, and it's very special. And that's usually one of the things that we miss most about leaving the military. So for me, I found that, with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that I had similar camaraderie. So that was good for me. The other thing is leadership is different. People think, leadership is the same whether you're in the military or in the civilian world. And it's like, no, it's not. It's totally different. Because in the military, the people that you're leading went through an arduous screening process to be in the position that they're in. And they don't want to lose that. If you're dealing with a person that went to the Naval Academy or West Point. You're dealing with an officer or college graduate who had to meet academic Ivy League rigorous curriculum, and all the while doing push-ups, being yelled at, being in uniform, being inspected. They weren't going to like Animal House parties. They are like really working it, and it's very difficult to graduate from one of those academies in a much different lifestyle than, say, if you go to the University of Florida or University of Southern Cal. It's like much different, So their level of commitment, their level of wanting to be there and wanting to be successful is very much different. Also, our enlisted personnel, they come in and maybe they go into the nuclear power program. I mean, at the minimum, all enlisted people are going through boot camp, which is very arduous. It's a screening process. You're doing your push-ups, you're being screamed at, yelled at, you're running endless miles. You're being inspected for everything from your uniform to making your bed every morning. Like, it's quite a challenge, and it's a filtering process because not everybody, makes it through boot camp. And then if you make it through boot camp, then you go on to your next level of training. And that next level of training, like say nuclear power school, very arduous. And it's almost like another 2 years of training, very arduous training with a high dropout rate, or submarine school, or air traffic controller, or going to be an interpreter, because then you're learning a whole new language and how to translate that to English and back and forth. Or, of course, one of our more famous military programs is, to go through BUDS, which is most commonly referred to as the SEAL training. They're going through 6 months training, as arduous as can be, and I believe the graduation rate is somewhere between 10 and 20%. Like the majority of people that go through, 80 to 90% of the people that go through fail. So those 10 to 20% that graduated are very motivated to be in that program. Like, they're very motivated to be successful. They're not showing up to their unit like, I don't really care how well we do it, or I'm just going to do the minimum. No, they're motivated. So, when you go into the civilian world after dealing with people with a mission that is so serious and working with people daily who are so motivated, who work so hard to be in that position, it's a difficult transition to go into something else. Like one of my closest friends, James, I don't know how he does it. Like, he went from flying Black Hawk helicopters for the U.S. Army in combat, in arduous conditions, and now, he works in the banking industry. He's like, I don't know how he did it. How he went from that to banking, but the dude is amazing. And he made that transition. He's an incredible person. But a lot of military people have difficulty making that transition because, like I said, the mission is different, the culture is different, the people you're working with, have different level of motivations, because in the military, it's not a 40-hour work week. It's like, no, you work until the job is done. And sometimes that's a 7-hour work week. Or like when we went to the Iraq War, like we worked every single day. Like there was no, it's Sunday, or it's a holiday, we got the day off. It's like, no, every single day you're working, you're fighting, you're moving. And like one of the differences in the culture is like, I remember when I was there, I was assigned to the 1 MEF, and General Mattis was leading 1 MEF. And no, I think he was leading 1st Marine Division, I'm sorry. But he relieved a colonel who was running a regiment who, it's not that the colonel necessarily did anything wrong, but the colonel was not performing their duties to the level of General Mattis's expectations. And General Mattis relieved them. And it stunned most of the civilian world. It even, I think it even made the papers back then. It was like colonel who had a very successful 20-some year career, fired. And fired not for negligence, not for dereliction of duty, but just not performing the job at the level that his general expected. And so it's a different mindset, it's a different mission. So that's what makes the transition for many military members so difficult, and like even my transition to a small business, sometimes I'll get some whiny customer, and I could give some nice customer service answer, but they get a curt military answer, and it's like, I probably lost that customer. And it's like, and but I don't have a boss that I have to answer to. Like if there was a CEO or an HR in the company that I worked for, I'd have to answer for, how I responded. For me, I just have to answer to my wife, who looks at me like, Saad, did you really have to say it like that? And it's like, I didn't, but the sailor came out in me, and my tolerance for their BS was already full. I was like, I had no more tolerance for it. So it's like, but those are the challenges of transitioning from civilian life to military life. So if you got any input for any of you that served or have family members that served, any input on suggestions on making the transition easier, and please make comments below, and we can all live and learn from it. So until next week, ciao.